Story 1. Nurse Nightmare. I had just settled into my third night on the graveyard shift, the quietest hours in the hospital. The hallways were dimly lit, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows that danced along the pristine white walls. The only sound breaking the stillness was the soft beeping of the monitors, like a heartbeat echoing through the corridors. I was responsible for several patients, but one in particular required my attention, a long-term coma patient who had been here longer than most of the staff. I went about my routine, checking charts and changing IVs, feeling the comforting rhythm of my tasks. It was during one of these rounds that I glanced at the hallway monitor screens meant to aid the night staff in keeping an eye on things. I remember the chill that slid down my spine as I saw a shadowy figure slip into the coma patient's room. It was undeniably a person, yet I knew that no one else should be on this floor. The hallways were empty, silent except for my own breathing. As I hurried down the corridor to the patient's door, when I reached the room, the door was ajar. I pushed it open, heart pounding, but found it exactly as I had left it, empty of any visitors. The patient lay unchanged, the machines quietly humming their rhythmic songs. I reviewed the electronic chart with trembling fingers and saw something that made my blood run cold. The heart rate had spiked dramatically just minutes before. Aligning with the time I saw that figure on the monitor, there was no medical reason this should have happened, especially with no one else around. Returning to my station, I tried to shake off the encounter. Yet, as the night crept on, more unsettling things began to unravel around me. I'd pass by a room only to notice that medical equipment had been moved. An IV bag hanging on the wrong hook, a stethoscope left in an odd position. Something or someone was meddling with the hospital's order. Faint footsteps echoed through the hallways, teasing the edges of my fraying nerves, though I'd find no source each time I investigated. There were moments, particularly in the ICU rooms, where cold spots would brush past me like a whisper on the skin, and the feeling of being watched became a constant, eerie companion. I dismissed it as nerves, the after effects of a long shift. Then, while checking on another patient, a familiar chill overtook me. I felt the unmistakable sensation of eyes on my back. The room was empty, just myself and the sleeping patient. Yet an unseen presence loomed thick in the air. The next morning, as the pale dawn began to illuminate the city, replacing the haunting shadows, I shared the night's strange occurrences with my co-workers. An older, no-nonsense nurse took in my story with a knowing nod. She spoke of a rumor I'd heard whispered, but had never taken seriously. Many nights ago, a beloved nurse had died suddenly of a heart attack while on duty. Ever since, people claimed she still wandered the halls at night, still caring for her patients from the beyond. I shivered at the notion, her story suddenly assuming a weight it had never carried before. Exhausted but relieved that the night was over, I prepared to leave, passing through the corridors that were now coming alive with the bustle of the daytime staff. An elderly patient, one I had checked on briefly that night, called me over. She thanked me for sitting with her all night, swearing that she felt safe knowing there was someone there. The sincere gratitude in her voice jarred me. I had only been in her room once during my shift, and it was for a routine check. My skin crawled as I realized she believed someone else had been with her when I had not. The haunting events of that night weighed on me heavily. Despite my desire to stick with nursing, the nights in that hospital became too daunting to bear. The chilling presence, the inexplicable occurrences, it all pointed to something I wasn't prepared to confront. I requested a transfer to the day shift, even agreeing to a significant pay cut. Anything was worth not having to face whatever lingered in those shadowed halls again. As I left the hospital behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was abandoning more than just a shift, but an apparition, still playing its eternal role in the nights I would never wish to see. Story 2. Drive-Thru Phantom. Working the late-night shift at the 24-hour drive-thru was a routine I had begrudgingly grown accustomed to. It was quiet, uneventful, and during the middle of those long, dark hours, a small window of relief came in the form of Officer Miller. His familiar police cruiser would pull up, headlights illuminating the menu board, and I'd recognize his calm, deep voice on the speaker as he placed his usual order. He was like a ghost of the mundane, his presence soothingly predictable in the silence of the suburban outskirts. The night he didn't show up was the night everything changed. I remember the time exactly. 2:13 a.m., just like every other night. His voice crackled through the headset, steady and unchanged. He asked for the same coffee and 2 apple pies. I confirmed his order, listening to the slight background hum of his patrol car on the other end of the line. But as the minutes ticked by, the spot at the pickup window remained glaringly empty. There were no glints of headlights reflecting off the stainless steel equipment. No familiar face peering through the glass. I leaned out of the window, peering into the dimly lit lot, but it was deserted. Pacing back and forth in the cramped confines of the kitchen, I tried to rationalize the situation. A sudden call, maybe? Or perhaps he'd been urgently redirected. But the quiet unease grew with every unanswered question. After placing his untouched order on the pickup counter, hoping for a simultaneous resolution and distraction, I continued with my tasks, keeping an anxious ear out for the comforting rumble of his engine. When I turned back to the counter later that night, the absence of the meal hit me like a splash of ice water. It was simply gone. Instinctively, I began searching the floor for any sign. A receipt, a napkin, something that might betray a prank. What I found were footprints, tracked in crimson, leading away from the empty spot on the counter. They were unmistakable, vivid against the white tiles. My breath hitched, and the cacophony of my heart drowned out all logical explanation. Panicked, my fingers fumbled over locks and door handles. I shut down the kitchen as best as I could, the blood pulsating in my ears as I fled, leaving the shadows and uncertainty behind. The thought of returning the following morning filled me with dread, but it was a necessity. The remnants of that chilling encounter haunted my mind long after I fled my post. Daylight didn't bring the clarity I craved. Arriving before sunrise, hoping to erase the remnants of my own terror, I was faced with a spotless floor. The counter held his order as if untouched by human hands, untouched by blood or ghostly prints. It was as though the night had swallowed its horrors whole, convincing me against all belief that it had been an elaborate figment of a weary mind. The truth came later, delivered in the grim print of the morning newspaper. Officer Miller, it detailed, had been killed in a shooting the very same day he ordered at the drive-thru. The weight of that revelation sunk deep into my bones, replacing the cold fear with an insidious dread. That voice on the intercom, asking for the usual, it was nothing less than the echo of a man who no longer walked among the living. Since then, every drive-thru night shift is spent teetering on the edge of the unknown, the unseen. There's a part of me that listens for him, wondering if that familiar voice will break the stillness once more. Each shift begins in anticipation, ends in the shadow of that singular, unearthly encounter. I dread the silence suddenly broken by what might be, and have embraced a fear I cannot unsee, one that settles into the spaces between the mundane and the inexplicable, waiting for a voice that may never return. Story 3. Janitor's Last Shift. The night shifts were always quiet. The office building nestled at the edge of the woods was empty after dusk. Except for me, the part-time janitor. I had come to appreciate the solitude. The only sounds being my footsteps padding softly over the carpets and the gentle swish of the mop on and tiled floors. My ritual began with a careful check of all doors and windows. Security was paramount, and it eased my mind to know everything was sealed tight, keeping the night and whatever lurked in it firmly outside. One particular evening felt different from the start. The air seemed to hum with an undercurrent of tension as I made my rounds. On reaching the second floor, a shiver ran down my spine. A window, which I knew I had locked, stood wide open. The cold fingers of a night breeze tugged at the edges of papers on nearby desks, rustling them softly. I took a deep breath, chalking it up to memory's lapse, and closed it, confirming the click of the latch twice. With a sense of unease lingering like a bitter aftertaste, I moved along the hallway, mopping floors and straightening out chairs. When I returned to check my work, a strange sight met my eyes. Dirt and pine needles lay scattered across the floor I had just cleaned, as if someone had dragged in a trail right from the woods. My heart thumped an erratic rhythm as I mopped away the mess. The muck seemed to mock my efforts as it appeared again, fresh each time, as persistent as the chill crawling up my spine. Somewhere beyond comprehension, I grappled with the unenviable thought of something moving stealthily through the corridors unnoticed. Time passed in fits and starts, my nerves jangling with every shadow that danced outside the windows, shadows too tall and still to be mere trees or distant animals. It was in these stolen moments, where fear held dominion, that I first heard it, the faint tapping at the window glass. Frozen in place, I dared not breathe until the tapping ceased, but curiosity warred with caution, drawing me closer. The window was closed, sealed tight, yet I could feel the presence of something or someone on the other side. Eyes burning from the strain of squinting in the dim light, I tried convincing myself that it was a product of tiredness when I first saw them, words forming briefly in the fog of breath on glass, as if someone were standing right there, whispering through the panes. Let me in. For one breathless moment, disbelief wrestled with terror. I blinked hard, and just like that, the message vanished, leaving only a vague outline as proof of its having existed. But had it ever really been there? I knew it would be impossible to work after that. My mind refused to settle, every shadow threatening to become corporeal. Every whisper of wind, potentially the harbinger of something far worse than the night. As morning broke over the treetops, I relayed the night's unsettling events to my boss. He listened with the patience of a statue, unconvinced, perhaps offering a necessary balm of denial that prevented immediate dismissal. He suggested stress, overactive imagination, nothing anchored in reality. Feeling as if I were losing a part of myself along with my sanity, I made a decision that morning to leave. I quit on the spot, the need to feel safe surpassing any attachment to the job. And though my boss's look of understanding was faintly consoling, it did little to erase the shadows that seemed to cling to my memory of that night. Walking out of the building for the last time felt like stepping back into the sunlight after years of twilight. Months passed, and normality gradually replaced the nights of unrest. Yet, a chilling affirmation came one day when I crossed paths with an acquaintance who had taken over my position. His anecdotes, laced with laughter, slowly turned somber. He described the same dirt trails, the impossible open window, and the words that miraculously appeared and faded. I didn't need to say anything. His hastily spoken final word about quitting spoke volumes of shared terror. Whatever haunted those second-floor offices was still there, waiting for the next late-night shift.